to uphold the Constitution. Well, the Constitution is to benefit the people. So my job realistically is to protect the people from having their constitutional rights violated. You know what I'm saying?
Right. That is exactly correct.
Yeah. And so, the idea for me is like the blind order followers, like, I don't like those guys any more than your average citizen likes them. You know what I mean? And seatbelt tickets, I won't write them, because if you don't want to wear your seatbelt,
you chose not to wear the seatbelt.
You chose not to wear the seatbelt. So, like, do I wear my seatbelt? Sure. Do I think I should be able to fine you for not wearing yours? No, it's not going to hurt anybody but you. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Absolutely.
So, anyway, sorry. I'm probably getting into stuff that you want to.
Oh, heck no. So. The best part about this is that I used to be like, okay, I would stress and be like, I would sit for a long time typing this introduction.
Sure.
And then I'm like, well, I didn't memorize it. So now I'm stuck here having to go like, and I guess it. And so it's like, it's better to flow into the conversation anyways.
Off the cuff.
And when you started with that, which is exactly where I was going anyways.
Sweet.
So Kevin, thank you so much, man. Like I said, I saw that you had liked some stuff from a lot of it on Instagram, excuse me. That bubbly water. And I was like, who is this? And I clicked it and I was like, I think he looks familiar.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think he goes to marathon. And then I was like, he does. Okay. And it started clicking in my head and I'm like, I had no idea, which is the best part about mixed martial arts.
Yep.
Is that you don't know who the dude next to you grappling or with you, it does what who he is, what his life's like. And I'm like, that's why they come here. Because then eventually, I always use Nick. Sorry, Nick. But like, they think he's like a quiet jerk, like a mean person. And I'm like, he's competitive, but he's taught me a lot about like myself, what I can take, how much I can lift, how fast I can actually move.
Absolutely. You're talking about Nick Mack.
Yeah.
Yeah. The dude is a world-class athlete, and when he's training, he is so focused that if you don't know him, you're like, damn, like that dude.
What a jerk.
Yeah. But I have had some of the most interesting and uplifting conversations with that dude. And once you get to know him, he's like one of those guys that would like bury a body with you. You know what I mean? Like, so no, it's funny that you bring that up, because it's such a melting pot of characters.
Yeah. And you would never know unless you see, you got the better end of the deal. I bring Nick up because like when I first started getting to know Nick, his diet must have changed, because he used to just like, and he'd be like, hey man, like he was just like in the middle of Trey teaching, and I'm like, shut up.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm trying to learn, and then I'm having this conversation with him, and then out of nowhere, Trey's like, you guys done? Or I'm like, look, now we're third graders. You got me in trouble. And I'm like, come on. And the best part about doing that is, like you said, that dedication, that commitment, not only to the craft that he's pursuing, which is a professional fighting career, but there's that value in relationships that you either don't have when you come in, but then you learn pretty quickly, because that's I did not walk into the gym thinking that at all. And so when I found this new level of like relationships, and I'm like, because out there it seems kind of selfish, quid pro quo, what can you do for me? How can I take advantage of you? And I was like, I figured I was going to get my ass kicked for a long time. And then they'd be like, you're all right. Yep. But immediately they were like, oh, it's real easy. Just grab here, see how tight that is?
Yep.
I mean, just that little moment like that.
Yep.
That's all I really needed. And, it's just, some of them are just fucking goofs. Like,
oh, dude, Mason Pello.
Oh my, yeah.
One of my favorite people in the world.
Yeah.
But he is so, he and I have more good conversations, mostly via Instagram, because he's so busy, training, and he trains at different hours, but about all these conspiracy theories and stuff.
Yeah.
I quit calling them conspiracy theories, because they turn out to be right half the time or more.
I'm like, it's
dude,
more now.
It's way more now.
Mm-hmm.
With COVID and a bunch of the stuff that has gone on over the last few years. I have gotten to the point where if the media calls it a conspiracy theory or the media rags on it, I start looking at it a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Because
it's a horse pill.
It turns out to
Joe
be
Rogan, it's a horse pill.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not a horse pill.
Yeah, and it turns out to be right most of the time, And so Mason, anyway, back to what you were saying. Mason is one of the most interesting characters at the gym.
The humble animal is what I call him.
Yes. And I've trained at probably off maybe four or five different gyms. Actually, I've been training for about 10 years on and off now.
Mm-hmm.
And marathon, shout out to Trey Ogden. The
shirt right there you're wearing.
Oh, Samurai Ghost, the general.
I caught it.
Yeah. This is probably my favorite shirt.
Oh yeah.
But he has built an atmosphere there that is so family-like and family-oriented that, like you were saying, as soon as you walk in and start training, when they see that you're somebody who is dedicated to improving yourself,
mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if you're there as a hobbyist. It doesn't matter if you're there for exercise or if you want to be, a pro fighter. Those guys take you into the fold, and they will absolutely beat your ass.
Oh yeah.
But they'll help you up afterwards, and they'll tell you what you did wrong. You know? And I think I've learned more training at Marathon in the last 2 years than I have in, all the years before that. I mean, skill set wise, I've jumped because of the atmosphere that they've built,
Yeah.
And you don't get the opportunity to train with high level guys like that at every gym.
Right.
And for Marathon is like a magnet for these guys between Scroggin, Mason, Nick Meck, Gomi, and now Breeden and
dude, I saw he was there on
Miles.
Saturday.
Yeah, Miles Johns,
mm-hmm.
Trey, obviously in the UFC. I'm sure I forgot a name, but like the caliber of people there, dude, is just unbelievable. And you see that there's levels to this. And I was joking the other day with somebody that you train so much with guys that are so good
mm-hmm.
that you start being like, damn, dude, like, do I suck?
Right.
But then you drop into another gym and you're like, okay, no, I just train with really good dudes.
That's it. That's exactly it.
And so you got to kind of remind yourself that, like, you're a small fish in a big pond at Marathon, and at a lot of other gyms, you'd be a big fish in a small pond. You know? And so it's humbling, but you improve so much more that way.
Right. Well, and then I'm going to mention this little, I think it's called the 33% rule. And it's like, you want to be the smartest in the room 33% of the time. You want to be at the same level 33% of the time in the rooms that you're in. And then you want to be the best in the other 33%. So, I mean, it's 99%.
Yeah.
So, and that's because you want to learn from the best. Then you get educated by the best. So then instead of being worse when you work, like instead of being behind, right? Instead of being like, oh, I'm always in this room, then you eventually get to that area where, oh wow, like when I train here, I'm 33%, like I'm not in the middle, I'm now teaching. So now I've leveled up and now I'm teaching the next, and then they're moving the same way. And like I mentioned that because that's where I know you from. Mm-hmm. But then, like I said, I want to get into your background.
Yeah.
So I don't know a whole lot about you as a person or background. Sure. So tell me about Guardians. Tell me about how this came about, and then your background from that.
Sure. Well, I work for a large agency in the Kansas City metro area, so I'm a detective on a crimes against children task force. And so I spend a majority of my time chasing pedophiles around and doing undercover investigations, proactive type stuff where I go undercover online and pretend to be a 13-year-old girl and, LOL, LMAO, and a lot of smiley.
I knew you were the toughest guy I've ever met.
A lot of smiley faces,
Yeah.
And those investigations are fun. And then I spend the other part of my time, I'm a squad leader on our SWAT team. And so I do the investigative side of things as a detective doing crimes against children. And then I do the tactical side of things on the SWAT team. And I've been with the sheriff's office for about 13 years. And when I first started, the training was vastly different than it is now. And so
I'm hoping in a positive way.
And yes, it's trending positive. Yes. But when I first started, I remember thinking to myself, you know, a lot of these techniques, a lot of the stuff we're doing, I don't know that it's going to work in a live physical altercation,
right?
You know? And at the time we were doing scenario based training where you'd put a bunch of headgear and gloves and pads on and there'd be a bad guy and you'd have to use these techniques on bad guy. And I remember the failure rate of these scenarios was pretty high. And the blame was always on the recruits, like, oh, these guys are not tough enough. They're not. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, maybe it's the techniques, maybe it's the training.
Right.
But as a recruit, your opinion, you know, doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So
zip it.
Yeah. And so as I went through law enforcement, I went out on patrol. I didn't really love patrol, and we can put a pin in that and come back to it because we started that conversation briefly. And then I started to realize that, you know, I kind of had two options with the training side of things. I could just accept the training. And at this point it had gotten better. There were some guys that were coming into the training division, and bringing in some aspects of mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu as we know it today. But it wasn't very widespread. And so I was like, well, I can accept the training that we're given and just complain about it, or why don't I just start training cops myself? Right. And so that was where the idea for Guardian came about. And I basically just said, you know what, I've been doing mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu for a while. I was part of our training division at my current agency for a while. I'm comfortable teaching. I'm comfortable writing lesson plans. Why don't I just take this stuff to as many agencies as I can take it to and improve the training as a whole? Because obviously, you know, with George Floyd and you know, some of the social justice issues, there was a huge microscope on law enforcement.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, this is the time where we need the best possible training we could have. And so I started training with guys like Trey, and other, you know, I went to California and trained with Henner and Hero and Gracie for a while.
Oh, wow.
And that's actually who I got my purple belt from. But I was trying to take these techniques, and then I was doing Muay Thai, and I was doing some, you know, wrestling and judo, and trying to take some of the best techniques I could find and figure out how to apply them to a control situation where, like, I need to take control of this guy with the least amount of force necessary.
That's, you know? The least amount of
force. Yes. You know, and some people deserve a lot of force. Some people don't.
Right.
So it's like
your job to gauge.
Exactly. And you got to have a common sense meter where, you know, you don't go overboard just because, you know, well, technically by policy, like, you got to be able to look at it in the gray area and be like, okay, yeah, by policy, I can probably punch this little female crackhead in the face. Do I need to? Right?
Nope.
Absolutely not. Right? I can take her down to the ground and control her very easily without anybody getting injured. And so that's kind of the way that training has evolved. And I've been taking all of this stuff. I think I've trained every law enforcement agency in the metro area.
That's amazing, dude.
At least one person from that agency. So I've given them training and then sent it back with them to take it to their department.
Yeah. Incredible.
And it just continued to get bigger, and we started doing more things. We started doing firearms training. The instructors that teach for Guardian are some of the best shooters, some of the most accomplished SWAT guys in the tactical community. And so we do a lot of firearm stuff now. We do ballistic shield work. We do a lot of SWAT-related courses. And then we also branched into the private sector because I was like, you know, this is stuff that, like, civilians should have too.
Right.
I mean, my thought was law enforcement is a few minutes away, and we're getting there as fast as we can. But you got to be able to survive for a few minutes until I get there.
Right. How can you handle it until I get there?
You got to bridge that gap. Because I'm going to get there as soon as I can, but a lot of these things are done within a few minutes. So you know.
Right. Like one of them was you have like one for like objects, like sharp objects.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's like, I mean, I don't know my facts necessarily in here, but a lot of them, even if you take away like, you know, firearms in general, you're like, they'll still find something
Yes.
and you're like, okay, how do I keep that person alive for 3 minutes and not be stabbed to death by the time I get there?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And I thought that was really, and you have a women's self-defense I saw on there as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of came to fruition through my wife and my sister-in-law. You know, because they were like, hey, obviously, you know, teaching grown men how to control somebody on the street is different. Those techniques have to be tweaked a little bit for, you know, a woman my size, or, you know, my wife would tell me this. And so I started doing a little bit of thinking about, okay, well, what's unique to women that men don't really have to deal with? Well, there's a lot of power dynamics that are unique to women being victimized by men. And so we structured the program based on, because I'm a big believer in, like, none of this can be theoretical. If I don't see some like statistical proof, then I'm not going to teach a technique. Meaning,
Right.
like we teach a lot of choke defenses to women.
Mm-hmm.
The reason we teach specific choke defenses is because I've gone and I've found the statistics that show what's most likely to happen in a domestic violence situation.
Right.
You're most likely to be choked this way. So this is how you overcome that. Hair grabs is another one. Men don't really have to worry about that. You know, when's the last time in a fist fight you saw a dude pulling somebody's hair? Like, it just doesn't.
Yeah, you don't.
You know?
They're like, let's duke it out.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah. It's the masculine way, right? Yeah, exactly. And that's another aside. Joe Rogan says it all the time. He's like, dude, I don't know what it is about men, but every man on the face of the planet thinks he can fight,
and they can't.
and almost none of them can.
Oh yeah.
It is like, he said something along the lines of, if you're a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, an average blue belt in jiu-jitsu, you could most likely control probably 95%, maybe more of the population.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Anyway, which I thought was a really interesting thought, and it makes a lot of sense, you know, and you see a lot of these street fight videos and you're like, what are you doing?
I'm glad you got there, because I watch them and I'm like this. I go, I know, I try and like, look at my room. This is the creative part of me. I'm like, I wonder how they got to the video before they hit the record.
Yeah.
And it's always like,
Yes.
no, it's always like, probably like he's talking to his girl. He's like, I'll protect you. Look at me. And then he's like, I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, you're gone.
Yeah.
Like, but most people aren't trained. They just have this false idea.
Yeah.
I can take care of anything.
I see red, bro. I see red, and then bodies start to drop. And
Yeah,
I'm
you're
like, dude, no, they don't.
Yeah, yours.
Yeah.
Yours.
Exactly.
You drop.
You drop if you come across anybody remotely trained.
Hey, I'm about to see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you see, this hands down by the side, nose to nose stuff. And I'm like, dude, that is a surefire way to get knocked out.
Is that a bird?
Yeah,
Neck,
exactly.
immediately hook it. Yeah.
So anyway, you know, going back to what we were talking about, I started the company based on the training that I had received. Again, not that it was necessarily bad, but it was what they knew at the time, and I could just see that there were some gaps that just weren't translating into these live scenarios that we were doing.
Right.
And so created the company. The company took off. And I kind of branched, like I said, into the private sector to teach civilians some of the same tactics that I'm teaching law enforcement. You know, and I got some pushback when I first started doing that. Like, why would you teach civilians the same stuff you're teaching cops? Like, you know, we need to be able to protect ourselves against people. And that's where the us versus them mentality, it kind of bothers me, you know, because I'm like, that's not what it is. That's not what it should be. Like, the civilians have as much or more of a right to have these skill sets to protect themselves without us. You know what I mean?
Well, there's also a difference if you're like, you're not just being like, hey, criminals, like, let me teach you what law enforcement's doing.
Exactly.
It's people who are actively coming to learn it.
Exactly. And plus, you know, at the end of the day, I consider myself a civilian more than a law enforcement officer. Like, that's my job, you
Right.
know. But who I am is a United States citizen. You know
Right.
what I mean? A family man, a husband, a father. And so I think to myself, like, well, what would I want somebody to teach me to protect my family and myself if I didn't have access to this law enforcement training, you know? And so that's kind of where the company grew from. And it's, you know, it's gotten big. It's doing well, and we're booking classes and constantly filling class. Most of my business is law enforcement still, just because, well, law enforcement has training budgets and civilians don't. So the money is there, you know. So
they also probably see the value.
Yeah.
They're like, whoa, that is a big gap we're missing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's another reason that I take my training at Marathon so seriously, is because, you know, if I'm going to preach all of this, then I should be able to demonstrate all of it, you know, and I should be able to use it. I should have case studies. Like, I should be using this stuff on the street and be able to tell people, like, hey, I have tested this stuff in real life situations and it works, you know.
Right.
And you know, physical fitness level is another big thing to me. All things aside, I'm a firm believer that the guy in better shape is going to win a fight. The guy who's more physically fit is going to win a fight.
Yeah. Even if it's terrible technique, it's like you're still gonna. Yeah.
Exactly, because you think about like a 3-minute fight. I mean, you know, you train, you do a 5-minute round. At 100%, and you're not even really under stress. At the gym, and so at the end of 5 minutes, you're like, dude, I'm smoked. But if you were under stress and this dude was really trying to hurt you, and like that 5 minutes lasts forever.
It does. It's a long time.
You know,
you're like, has it been 20 minutes right now?
Yes.
Like, no. It's been 30 seconds, Chase.
30,
I'm like, oh,
30 seconds of being smothered.
Yeah. Also, most people can't handle pressure like that, so they just immediately go, whoa. And then my favorite is, so I've heard, like I said, I've brought people who, and again, I'm not to derail any of the where we're going, but there's people who have the same idea. Oh, I can fight. I totally can. And then I'm like, come in the gym.
Yes.
Check it out. And like, almost, I'd say my success, I guess in this rate, it'd be a fail rate, would be that they come in, do a class or two, and then they're like, I'm not really looking to fight in the cage. And I'm like, we're not. We're fighting in here. We're training for a scenario. And then I'm like, just do jiu-jitsu. And they downgrade. And then they're like, that's tougher than the MMA class.
Yes.
And I'm like, I know there's a lot to learn in there, but like you said, you'd be able to handle 95% of people outside in the world.
Yes.
That brings me as being, because when I trained, I was the same size. I didn't go up, I didn't go down in weight. But by learning what I know, I was able to utilize that weight in ways that I didn't know how before. So then now I might as well be 190, you know, like it's just all about the knowledge and having that in there. And, you know, I have a 9-year-old boy. And so, you know, he also was looking in class. He'd look at me and be like, okay, wow. And he's like, I remember he looked and he was like, that round didn't go well. And I'm like, I know. I'm like, and I'm like, out of breath. And I'm like, I know. But, you know, now I'm better because of that.
Yes.
And not necessarily saying it, but just him seeing me then, you know, after a minute and going back, he's like, oh, like that. I could see the switch, like SpongeBob. Now I'm realizing I watch too many kid shows, but like the plug goes in and it's like, okay, that's in there.
Yep.
So now I'm like pushing myself past limits that I thought I had before.
Yes.
You know?
And resiliency. I mean, they learn resiliency from watching you. Even if you get your ass kicked over and over and over again, they're like, man, he's willing to go out there and get his ass kicked, but keep showing up and keep coming back until he's doing the ass kicking.
Right.
You know? And that's a really cool thing. And I've got 3 kiddos, and my 2 boys, My oldest boy is 11. My youngest boy is 8. And they both train at Marathon. And they both do jiu-jitsu, and they just had their first tournament recently. And the range of emotions that they went through and had to deal with, and the adversity, and, it was great for them. It was absolutely great for them, the wins and the losses. And they both walked out with a gold medal. And my oldest ended up with a gold and a silver. But they both lost a couple matches too, and it was good for them. It was hard for me to watch,
right?
Because you want them to just always succeed.
Get it,
go. Yeah. And I had to bite my tongue, let the coaches do the coaching, and shout out to Coach Mary. I don't know if she watches any of this at all, but she does a very good job of coaching the kids and telling the kids, like, hey, I know you want to go talk to mom and dad, but come talk to me first so that we can talk about what happened, and then you can go talk to mom and dad. And that was hard for me, but I was able to kind of step back and let the coaches coach. And it ended up being way better than me trying to be on the sidelines coaching them. You know what I mean? Because I'm approaching it from an emotional place, because I want them to succeed.
My kids, they lost and hurt my kid. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but anyway, I'm derailing us again. But the adversity that they go through, and then they learn, what it means to push through shitty situations, obviously applies to everything in life. Right. So
it's a universal lesson that there was something else. I don't know if it could have been, but I've just changed my viewing. So I used to watch TV and stream and do this, and now I'm like, I think that sucks now.
Yes.
Compared to the amount of information we can get now from like podcasts or like listening to Joe Rogan. So I really can't tell you exactly where it came from. Excuse me. But they were saying that if you do that early on for kids, then it's like night and day. And I'm like, oh, if I had that when I was a kid,
oh man,
I wouldn't have been so this, so that, so if I can, and that's not forcing them into jiu-jitsu or forcing them into this. It's like they watch, they make the decision, and they're like, when they make that decision and then it gets difficult, they were like, but my dad, I saw him do that, but now he's exponentially better 30 days later.
Yes.
So I can do it too. It's that reassurance for them. And, like I said, I was always a small kid. And so that was, my confidence went up 1,000% after training at Marathon. Mm-hmm. And knowing that, I'm not getting my butt kicked. I am, but I'm also like, I remember getting mad, like turning. And they're like, what are you doing? They're like, come here. And like, Gomi's like, stop. Like, he would literally pause me in the middle of this round and be like, you can get it. Don't think.
Yes.
Go. And then, just that verbal confirmation. And it didn't happen that day. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen that week. Mm-hmm. It happened next week on like a Tuesday on like round 4. And I was like, holy shit.
Light bulb.
Yeah. And he's like, he goes, told you.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man. Yeah. Okay. I'm so sorry. That thing's about to die. Darn it.
That's okay.
All right, intermission. I want to get back to the talk we had about children.
Yeah.
Because I also didn't know that stuff transfers just by watching. Oh, because there's things that, and this is, I think, where everyone goes. They always go like, oh, if my dad, if my mom, and they're like I recently just was able to explain it to my sister. So she's 3 years younger than me. So she's 23. Sure. I think, KK, you can correct me on here, I guess. She'll see it. She runs the social media stuff.
You're only 26?
Mm-hmm.
Damn, dude. I'm 35.
No, you're not.
I'm 35. I'm 35 years old.
Okay. That is not what that's not what I would have guessed.
Hey, I'm going to derail us again.
Go ahead.
I owe that to my little brother, who owns his own gym, Kansas Built Fitness in Olathe. Those guys, him and his wife, have a program a nutrition program, a strength and conditioning program, and just a whole life, like a holistic wellness program at their gym that my brother has structured for me. And the dude is the best trainer I have ever worked with, and I've worked with a lot of them. And their gym is absolutely beautiful. They're getting ready to expand to make it even bigger, and they're going to actually start a membership, the way that any big box gym has, where you can be a member and go in and do your own workouts. Right now, it's just personal training only. But the stuff that he has me do, I feel like I'm in better shape than I was when I was 25. Yeah. I mean, hands down. And it's
that it can change like that. And people are like, I don't know. I'm like, yes. You can. Like, you just, it's also, yes. If you're used to the thing that isn't quote unquote healthy or good for you, and then you go like, oh, that's also something that came from training. Yep. It literally hijacked the way that my brain works. So it was like, it sounds so messed up, but it was like I actively would seek out the hard thing. Yes. And then I'm like, dude, then I killed it. And I'm like, it feels like when my kiddo sees me level up. And I'm like, oh, I get that outside of the gym now? Yes. Like, life is way different. It's way better. It's a better way of living and accomplishing than just being like, I could go for that, but that's easy. That's going to make me uncomfortable. Yeah. Right? I don't want to do discomfort. Yeah. So my brother did 75 Hard, Andy Frisella's program. I don't know if you know. I've heard of 75 Hard. I've heard 75 Hard. So he did 75 Hard. And 75 Hard is 75 days of 2 workouts a day every day, 2 45-minute workouts a day every day, a diet plan or some kind of a nutrition plan. You have to read 10 pages of some kind of a personal development book, and you have to take a progress picture every day for 75 days. And then there's phases after that include things like cold showers every day, 5-minute cold showers, basically just like put yourself in the most uncomfortable positions possible and force yourself through them, right? To level up, just like you were saying. And he encouraged me to do 75 Hard, and I did 75 Hard, and it was the exact same thing. Like now I won't take warm showers anymore. I love taking cold showers so much. It'll hijack the way that you think. It completely hijacks the way that now I feel like a complete fraud if I take a warm shower. Like I'm like, oh man, I'm enjoying this. Like I should be like suffering through this shower. Yeah. But the joy, the joy you get from like conquering those types of things, like you just think to yourself, you're like, dude, nobody else is taking cold showers right now. Yeah, no. I'm above my competition because nobody else is doing this. Nobody else is getting up at 5 a.m. and reading. Nobody else is, doing X number of hours a week of outside time with their kids. Like I track that stuff, and it's just. You talked about hijacking your brain, and once it happens, you can never undo it. No. Well, when you permanently make the call. Yeah. Like when you can do it for little stints and be like, yes. Yeah, see, I'm doing that. And you're like, but you're just lying. Yes. When you actively like cross the threshold, you're like, well, fuck the line over there. Yeah. You're like, I'm good over here. And that's the difference between motivation and discipline. Yes. Right? Like that's it. Motivation, you're like, fuck yeah, let's do this. And then you do it hard for like 2 weeks, and then you stop, and you got to figure out how to get remotivated. But then you look at guys that have passed through that threshold, and now it's just what they do. Yeah. Like it doesn't, some days I like it, some days I don't, some days I'm motivated, some days I'm not, but it's just what I do, you know? And that's where Kansas Built Fitness and my brother and my sister-in-law, they were huge. Those guys and then Marathon together have, in the last couple of years, have made me a completely different person. And it's crazy that, like I said, I never would have guessed. I honestly wouldn't. I'm like 30, I appreciate that. 30? Like it was like 30 maybe? I appreciate that. Yeah. It's but my favorite thing was, it was, again, I don't watch a lot of TV. I watch a lot of I like, if I watch something, it's a video podcast, so I'm interactive with it. Yeah. And so one of them had this therapist on, and he was describing how he approached, like, they had a topic of insecure men. Like, and they go, yeah. So I tell him, go ask out 100 girls. And he's like, what? No. He goes, do 100 in a week, and then meet me, and then we'll talk about it. And if they don't do it, he's like, well, I guess you don't want to get better.
Yeah, you don't want to pass through that threshold.
Yeah, sometimes they need that tough love. But then when they do, he goes, how did it go? And he goes, it was hard at first, but then it was medium, and then it was no big deal. He goes, great, that's how it should feel all the time now.
Yes.
And he goes, oh. He goes, it just takes that period of pushing through it, and then they're able to accept, like, rejection, and then they can take that lesson and then flourish somewhere else, wherever they're at, whether it's their job or outside of it, or
100%
extracurricular activities. And he's not saying, like, just go, hey, do you want to go out? Like, he's like, it's just practicing the thing in that live situation, just like your programs.
Yep.
That make it so it's like, that's just the thing I know how to do.
Yep.
And one of them that was really cool was, like I said, I was going through, and they had, of course, for my sister, it was the women's self-defense class. And, I mean, now that I typed it up, and I'm like, okay, now that I'm typing it up, I seem like a psycho. But it's only because I love you so much.
Yes.
And it's because, she lives up in the city, and has her own place, has her own job, has all this stuff. And as her older brother, I get, like, worried about it.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay, I know she's home. Let me give her a call. And then no call, no answer. And I'm like, oh, no. Then I start to rally the troops, the family. And I'm like, someone get a hold of her. I'm worried about it. And then next thing you know, grandma's calling, mom's calling. And then the whole time, she's doing something very, like, regular. Like, oh, I left my phone when I went to go to the mailbox, or, like, I'm in the shower.
Yeah.
And I'm like, by the time she responds back to me, the original caller, I have, like, all right, unit, here we go. We got to find her. She works here. She works here. She could be anywhere in between.
Search party.
Right. And then I'm like about ready to, like, split up the team, like, go Power Rangers. And then she's like, why is everyone trying to get a hold of me right now? And I'm like,
and you're like, oh man, it's weird. I don't know.
Well, I just go like this. What are you doing? Are you okay? She's like, I was taking a shower. I'm in my house. And I'm like, oh. I was like, yeah, that's my bad.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's my bad. So, things like that where she could have a practical sense of, like, learning to defend herself. Not only would I be less worried, but I think she would be more confident in, because there's a whole different dynamic with grown men walking, like, Power and Light.
Yeah.
Let's say if I walk to Power and Light, I don't necessarily have to look around or worry about things. I can worry about what's kind of in front of me, not behind me. They're, like, swivel-headed all the time. Yep. So it's a whole different perspective, and like you were talking with your wife, right? It's the same thing. If you were just like, it was fine, like, you're going to be, that's ignoring the problem. But if you equip them, then that solves both.
Yes.
It gives them the tools, and it gives you the ease to know that they have the tools they need.
Yep.
And so when I adapted that, like, perspective a little bit, I'm like, wow, like, it's nice to be a guy. Like, there's certain situations, because I spend a lot of time with her now, and that's something else too. Like, I have people going, you're really close with your sister. Like, that's really amazing to see that you guys do this, hang out. Now we work together and do this thing together, and I'm like, it's because we chose to do so. Yeah. Like, it was Christmas, and I'm like, my mom has 2 brothers, and I'm like, you can tell. But it's also not very close because they have different lives, and I get that. One has 4 kids under, like, 5. And then one of them is just high school coach, track coach, teacher. He's in charge of all the athletic programs. And so he's very busy. They're both very busy and on separate, like, 2 hours apart. And so I go, I don't want that. I want to be close with you. And if we do it now, then it'll be a thing that's just there all the time.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of it is also that decision. It's also like you said, crossing that threshold with anything. It's like being fully committed to whatever it is you're going to do, and then actively following through with it to get the result that you want. And by doing that, I'm able to, be close with her and talk with her, and then walk places, go out and do things. And, up until that moment, I was just like, oh, men and women, they're different. And that's where it stopped. It's like they have a whole different way of life.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I feel really grateful that I feel the way that I can. And, you know, like I never thought that someone would have to constantly, I'm like, that sounds exhausting. Like I don't have to do that.
Yes.
And she was like, yeah, or like I never had this last story about the sister story.
No, go ahead.
But there was something that I was noticing that I wasn't recognizing until I spent a lot of time with her, and it kept happening. And it'd be me and her, and we look similar, like we could be siblings, of course. But for women, they look at like us walking together, and they're like kind of a jealousy, angry vibe, and the men are always like,
yeah,
nice,
yeah.
And I'm like, it's my sister,
You're
and
like,
we went out. We went out during the draft, and I was like, I don't want to go home. Let's just talk at like Power and Light or get pizza or something. And we're walking by, and a dude literally had to like stop me. He like grabbed my arm. Obviously, he's intoxicated. It's like midnight, and he's like, "You got a nice one there." And I look at him. I'm like this. I go,
"What do I say to that?"
And I'm looking at him like, "What?" And he goes, "I hit that. I hit that too." And my sister's like, "Let's keep it moving."
Oh,
and I'm like, he said that right to
Yeah.
me, and like you were within earshot. Of course, you heard it because you said, "Let's keep moving."
Yeah.
And she's like, "That happens all the time." And I'm like,
Yep.
"You guys suck. You guys, they literally suck."
Dude, a portion of the male population are some of the worst types of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I actually am starting kind of another thing, a little branch, I guess, of Guardian, that I'm calling the True Masculinity Project. And essentially what it is it's trying to drown out, it's going to be a kind of a boot camp for men who seem lost in what society says is masculine, or you shouldn't be masculine because it's bad, like you get the feminist movement, and then you got the rebound of that, which is these dudes that are like uber what they consider masculine, like I just smash a whole bunch of chicks and get money and like that's masculinity, and it's neither of those things. You know what I mean? Not at all.
Yeah.
And so this project basically is a boot camp like course or program for men, and it's going to touch on all of the different aspects of true masculinity. So physical fitness is obviously a big part of it. Being a dedicated husband and father, if that's what you're called to, being able to recognize those voices in society that are telling you masculinity is one thing and it's not. You know what I mean? Right. But that's something that I'm kind of working on, and
I love it. I love the idea.
Well, I'm planning on trying to bring in some of the guys that I think are great examples of true masculinity, to speak to these guys, to work out with these guys, to encourage these guys, and hopefully these guys come out the other end of this program with knowledge that they can use to get to the point that we were talking about, where you've pushed your mind beyond that threshold. So now you know what you're actually aiming for. You have goals.
That's it.
Yes. It's a never ending process. I mean, you will always be trying to grow as a man until the day that you die. But there's like specific pillars that build on that, and as a husband and a father, and I'm devoutly Catholic too, which is a huge part for me.
God's a big key over here too.
What's that?
God.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's a spiritual component to masculinity also that gets ignored a lot. But there is a way that everybody can incorporate all of these pillars, the spiritual portion, the physical fitness portion, you know, the education portion.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people I have a blog on my website that has book reviews, and I always say that a true guardian is not just a man of physical prowess,
Right.
but he's also somebody that has a sharp mind. And one of my favorite quotes is, if society has its fighting done by.
I loved it so much I typed it out.
Oh, dude, let me see.
Yeah.
It.
So, because I mentioned that you had that on there, because it wasn't just about, because I didn't know how we get there, but I was like, it's not. If people somehow, for whatever reason, tune out, they're like, guns, knives, this,
fighting, muscles. Yeah.
There's a spiritual component.
Yep.
And the quote is,
it's from Thucydides, I think.
Oh, dude, it's so good. Yeah, it says, the society that separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting by fools.
Yes.
And I was like, you know, like, there's certain things that I'm like, I want a tattoo. And it's like, that's too long for a tattoo. But it's good to keep up here as a mental tattoo.
Yes.
And I'm like, dude, that's so... I mean, tell me how that's not more relevant right now.
Oh, 100%.
And I'm like, oh, my 100%. Goodness.
And that's when I say that there is two sides of not inauthentic masculinity in our society right now. It's the fighters who are fools,
mm-hmm.
right? The guys who are like, just smash a lot of chicks and lift weights and
I can handle myself.
I can handle it. Yep. And then it's the opposite side where it's like the uber feminine man who is like, you know, who doesn't believe in any type of physical prowess or any type. There's a middle ground there where you've got to be able to protect yourself and your family, but you also have to be educated enough and wise enough to be in touch with your spiritual and your emotional side. And the only way you do that is by adopting, you know, this spirit of kind of stoicism. You
mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Where like you are able to kind of detach every once in a while and focus on, you know, reading a specific book for a specific purpose or attacking a specific challenge just because it's a challenge. And you know what I mean? And
mm-hmm.
kind of growing in that way. And so, you know, kind of coming back to what we were talking about, it's really important to recognize, obviously, the differences between men and women. But, and it's a big reason why I got into law enforcement in the first place, too, was growing up, my dad was a very masculine person. And he was always somebody who was like, you know, it's your job as the big brother
mm-hmm.
to protect your little brothers, to protect your mom,
mm-hmm.
and to protect the people around you who cannot protect themselves.
Yeah.
That's your job as a man. Like,
right.
that's just what it was growing up for me. You know what I mean?
Well, and if before I'm holding on to it, but before I
please,
forget,
please.
The thing that was perfect with those two analogies, it was like, all right, so if you're the side where it's uber feminine,
mm-hmm.
that's just pure ignorance.
Yep.
And then the one where you're doing all the things that you think are masculine,
mm-hmm.
that's just pure insecurity.
100%.
So if you're either ignoring every problem, or you're too insecure to like deal with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, if you meet that in the middle, that means to me, it's like, okay, so you're not only extremely confident in who you are, what needs to be done, like you just described, but you're also like educated in the fact that that's what needs to happen. Like
yes.
That's who I need to become and be, because I don't want to be either of those. I want to be secure in myself and be the man that I need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you, that was just like the perfect thing. And I'm like, oh, that's so good. Because those are the two, you know, whether you like news or whatever you want to watch, that's usually the two sides you get. It's like,
yeah,
it's either like womanizer or
toxic masculinity.
Yeah. It's just like, it's like, what if you mesh that and just meet in the middle?
Yeah.
You'd be a secure, confident man who also is educated.
Yes.
I don't see why that's a
yes.
problem.
You'd be what I call a guardian.
Oh.
That's it. It all comes together.
That's it. Perfect.
Guardian Training Solutions. And that's my goal. I'm trying to create guardians.
And it's, you know, and as I dive into like finding things and making sure that, I don't use questions, but if there's like just right there, I'm like, I typed it, right? Like, that's good to have.
Yes.
So I always do the preparation and get that thing down. And so even if it's on my phone, it's still in my head because I've typed it, looked at it. But as I'm going through the website of Guardians itself, I'm like, I'm in. Like, that's exactly who I want to be. Awesome. And who people watching should actively, the table.
Oh, sorry.
Good. You're good. Adjust that all the way. It lost a leg. It's like,
no. Poor thing.
Yeah, my kiddo's stronger than I thought. He like was here and like moved, and then I just watched this leg go out, and I'm like, oh.
You're like, oh no.
I'll just shove my amp in there. That's the leg.
If it makes you feel better, I never would have noticed. I just thought that's where the amp went.
That's where it goes. That's actually where it goes. Yeah, perfect. There's no leg. I covered it up, but yeah. So as I was going through it, I'm like, I'm very excited to talk to Kevin. So thank you again for coming in. Dude. This isn't like the outro thing. I just wanted to give you praise for not only taking the time to like cultivate that and build something that's of super, super high importance, especially now. Yeah. But also not just like holding it for yourself, like being selfish with it. Like you're like, no. Anyone who wants this, like I am right here. Like, and
well, I appreciate that. I really do, because it's, it's hard, and there's a lot of outside forces, whether you're talking about spiritual forces or just society in general, that wants this message squashed. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I fully believe it's the spiritual side.
I do too.
I mean, 100%.
The nuclear family is the single strongest positive influence in society. And you can see right now in our culture that it's being attacked on all fronts. The father figure is being denigrated and is being, told that he's not necessary, right? But the reality is that statistically, the father figure, and this is not a throwing shade at moms, but I can't remember the exact statistics, but it was a study that was done about children and their religious faith. And it goes, it's any religion. If mom and dad both are practicing that religion, the kids are like almost 100% gonna also follow in their footsteps, right? Yep. But if the mom only practices that faith,
oh no.
Uh-oh, that one's dying now too.
Did that one turn off?
Mine did. Yep.
Oh, mother pearl.
Pause.
I got you. I'll keep this one too. Why do you think we're becoming more Europeanized though?
Dude, I don't know. I mean, I've thought a lot about it, and I just think our culture, all the way from the music to movies to the books, media, it's all just aimed at a specific agenda, and it's convincing, in my opinion, it's convincing kids at a young age that this is what the real world is, and it's really not. Like if you turn off the TV and don't watch, Hollywood movies, and you focus on you, like you don't see a whole lot of that stuff amongst your friend groups and amongst, you know what I mean? Yeah. But you watch the news, dude, and it's like everybody's transgender. Everybody's got something. You know what I mean? Everybody has. It's and obviously I'm exaggerating, but they definitely exaggerate the number of people who believe in kind of these fringe ideologies, you know what I mean? And it's convincing kids at a young age that like that's what life is supposed to be, and it's not,
Well, that statistic was the exact. I read this, like heard the same thing, and it was like, that's why, it's. I always want better for your kids. Yes. You want them to have everything you didn't, and this and that. But as I got to doing that, I realized one important thing when I was in here, which was I did it since August. So I had this in August, and I started from August to December. I was in here all the time till like 11 o'clock. Yep. Calling my kiddo. And then January came around, and I'm like, okay, I got to make this more scheduled. I'm up till midnight, then I got to drive home. Now I'm going to bed at like 1. And I get it. There is a sacrifice requirement when it comes to getting something that other people's don't have and building something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized that I knew that couldn't be long term.
Yes.
I'm like,
yes.
You know, I can bring him in here. He can sit down. He can do this. He can do the computer, and he can have a good time. But ultimately, I'm also being like, hey, sit in front of this TV while I sit in front of my TV, and like for 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, let's do this for an hour. Take a break. So for me, if I regiment that like hour by hour, I can make sure that he gets the nurturing he also desires. And then from January to like now, I didn't really see it at first because like I've always been around. So he's always only known me, and then I've always been the solid thing.
Sure.
So when solid thing was doing something else, in my mind I was like, it's for him in the future. But that was just trying to, in my mind, like I thought that'd be better, but it was just trying to make up for the lost time I'm having right now.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, when that clicked, it's not like I made the decision.
Sure.
So when we get back to that spiritual element,
yep,
it's exactly what it is. It was like, I knew that this was a plan. This was God's way of what I'm doing, and I'm on the right path. But it was like, okay, now that you've done all the heavy loading, like it's all good. Like now we have to make sure that your kiddo, as he transitions from 3rd to 4th grade, 4th to 5th, and then going into middle school and getting older, he's like, 1, you're here for it.
Yep.
2, that sure, like he's seeing already all the fruits of the labor, but now it's time to be there for him emotionally,
sure,
be there for him through his achievements, whatever he wants to do, and it's been a complete shift in his attitude from that 6 months to like now.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's true. That also ties into, the dad being around. And it's another part of that statistic, or maybe a separate one,
mm-hmm.
was so if the mother is also still teaching to the kids, it's like it's still high, but it's also not 100%.
Yeah. And that's where I was going. I don't even know if I finished actually saying it before the camera started to die, but it was, if the mom and dad are both practicing whatever faith, then the children are almost 100% likely to follow.
Mm-hmm.
If the mom only practices and the dad does not, it's like 20% chance.
Right.
But if the dad only practices and the mom does not, it's like 85%. So
wow.
The statistic is showing that, and again, it's not throwing shade at moms, it's just statistics, that if the dad leads in a specific direction,
mm-hmm.
the family will follow. And if the mom is leading, the family most likely will not follow. And
mm-hmm.
it's not because the mom is a bad mom or that, moms are not important. They have a different role,
mm-hmm.
right? They're there to nurture.
Right, this is correct.
Right? The father is there to set the direction of the family and to essentially say, hey, these are the values that we as a family champion, and this is how we're going to do things. And when you have a father figure that's absent, it collapses.
Yeah.
And it's such a sad state in society where we're trying to say that A, men and women are no different, and B, that the father figure is not necessary, that
right.
any type of family structure is acceptable, which and a lot of times you don't get to pick your family structure, and I
right.
get that, right? And
Absolutely.
and again, that's not throwing shade on anybody who is doing the best that they can, whose dad walked out, or you know what I mean? Like they have to do the best that they can do with what they've been given, obviously. But then that's also where I feel like it's up to us as men to step into some of those roles for people who might not even be part of our family.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because their dad's not doing the job.
They might even not know that they need it.
Yeah.
I
think a lot of people don't know that they need it.
Yeah, and then they have it and they're like, whoa. Like, also that's something that, if you want to, that's something that they take. They go, like what you just said, that's what they try to take out. They go, oh my gosh, look at all the other things he didn't say that he's actually subliminal. I'm like, he didn't say that at all.
Yep.
Like it's on tape.
Yep.
And there's certain things that you can't take out because, again, from a spiritual perspective and having God as the backbone and for the moral compass that, we all need. If you don't have one, well, good luck.
Yeah. Yeah.
But from having that, it's like, now I can't, it's the same thing. You cross the line. I can't go back.
Mm-hmm.
Over there, it's way worse than having the stability and the structure and to watch the growth happen in your children rather than just be, whether it was, ignorant or just insecure. It's like, for me, that's God filled that too. And I was listening to, Rainn Wilson was doing a lot of podcasts recently, but he's very out there with the spiritual nature. But one thing he said reminded me of just a flash of oh my gosh, I forgot that. Mm-hmm. And he said, sometimes we forget, all of us forget on a daily basis that we are a fully made spiritual thing placed inside a temporary living body vessel.
Yes.
And I was like, holy cow. So that means, and then that made me think okay, that means that from my perspective, God made the entirety that we are, who we are, everything about us. And for me, it looks like a sphere, right? And then he's like, I got this really tiny jar.
Yep. Just jam it all in there.
And then he's like, they'll realize that full potential after.
Yes.
And it's like, so all that stuff that, false masculinity and all these things that are very, very negative. It's like, that's not, you're ignoring everything that's who you are, what you're made to be.
Yes.
And the removal of that is, for me, it's unstable. It doesn't look correct. It's not something that I hope people see it and go well, I don't think that, it should be there. For me, it's always there in the back of my mind, okay, well, that's not, I know who I am. I'm secure in this and that and whatnot. And I just don't think a lot of young men, and then, who are coming into adulthood, 18, 17, I'm it makes me terrified for my own kiddo.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Because not only do you have, not to get, conspiracy theory with it, but, there's a lot of technological stuff happening now that makes me terrified for my kiddo.
You are segueing into my job as a detective doing crimes against children, because the technology that is at work to manipulate children is absolutely atrocious.
Right.
It is insidious.
Mm-hmm.
Parents don't know that it's happening because a lot of parents don't understand technology.
They're taught not to. It's just Snapchat, or it's just this, and they're whoa.
So I will say that a large majority of the cases that I see where a child ends up being victimized, it is obviously the fault of the predator, the perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
But the next person that the fault lies on is the parent, or the shoulders of the parents, because almost every time I tell the parents, I'm like, okay, well, they tell me, well, my daughter was victimized, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let me have her phone, right? Because we have some forensic software that I'll do a download of her phone, and I can examine her phone forensically and find all these messages and photos and stuff and communications and locations and stuff like that. And they'll say, well, we don't have her phone. And I'll ask them, well, so she's been communicating with this, 35-year-old. She's 13, whatever the case is.
Oh, dude.
She's been communicating with him, and she still has her phone. You guys know she's been communicating, and she still has her phone. Well, yeah, she won't give it to us. And I'm like,
they say
it all the time. She won't give it to us, or, well, we want to make sure that she also has her privacy. And the next question is, okay, well, we need to get her phone. Once you get her phone, what's her passcode? Well, we don't know her passcode. She won't tell us. So,
my gosh!
At that point, I'm like, well, you guys are contributing to this just as much, as the guy who's preying on your daughter, because you're not actively taking a protective role to monitor this stuff. Like you should be, number one, my kids are 11. My oldest is 11. My daughter is 10. And my youngest son is 8. My daughter has an iPod, and they have a kid's phone that they're only allowed to use if they're going to a friend's house and they need to get a hold of us.
Yeah.
Or they're at home, we leave them at home, and my wife and I go do something or whatever. They've got that there so they can contact us in an emergency. That phone is completely locked down. You can do nothing on that phone except make a call or text numbers that we have programmed into the phone, right? They don't have internet access. They don't have apps. They don't have, and the number of kids who are like 7, 8, 9 years old that have their own iPhones, their own Instagram accounts, their own, dude, you wouldn't believe it. And parents just don't, they're just like, well, we want them to be able to have their privacy and be, you know, and it's just killing this younger generation, obviously figuratively speaking, but emotionally, spiritually. I mean, I think the statistic that I read somewhere was that depression in like 10 to 16-year-olds has grown exponentially. And I'm not going to give a statistic because somebody will fact check it and be like, oh, you're so full of shit.
If they've gotten this far, you know what I mean? If they've gotten this far, they're probably like,
True.
well, are you serious? Like, they're
True.
probably...
So the statistic is that depression, anxiety, body dysmorphia in kids has, I think, damn near doubled since all of these apps have been widely available and kids have started using these apps. Because you think about, like, you go on Instagram as a grown man and you see all these dudes who have perfect abs and they're all millionaires and and it's all fake.
It is.
But kids don't know that. So they look at themselves and they're like, wow,
Yes.
I don't stack up, right? And so then you have kids younger and younger and younger committing suicide and doing drugs or drinking or getting into risky behavior because they have such a bad self opinion, and it's solely related to screens and social media use, you know. And now it's even finding its way into the freaking Disney Channel and stuff like that. Like, you can't even let them watch shows like that anymore because of the crap that's on there. So my advice to parents is, number one, they don't need their own device until they're driving.
Yeah.
And if they do have their own device and they have apps, you know every password, and you do, if not nightly, at least weekly checks and examinations of every social media app they have.
Yeah.
Everything that they do on their phone. And if you're not good with technology, find somebody who is, because I guarantee you your kid's hiding stuff on his phone or her phone that you don't know where to find it. You know, because you're not comfortable with technology. But that's a huge one. And, you know, I see more parents who they're just ignorant of what their kids are doing on the internet, you know?
And like I said, I have two examples. So the first one is the simple one is the Disney one.
Yep.
So like and again, I don't have a problem at all with what someone would choose to do for their life.
Nope.
Right? I don't care if that's sexual orientation. I don't care if that's spirituality, what you believe. None of that. That's totally fine, right? It's also not my job to keep trying
to police that.
Yeah, it's like that's right. But I watched Lightyear, the Buzz Lightyear movie.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I'm watching it. Like, I had no idea. I went in to the movie theater with my kiddo. And again, he's young enough that he's not going to ask a question. But it hit me like I have to be more aware. Because as I'm watching, I go like this, and he's like, they don't even say like his officer in charge is a lady, and then she has a wife. Okay, that's never stated. It's never said.
Sure.
So I'm watching this movie. I'm eating popcorn. I'm like, this is a good movie. I like this movie. And then suddenly he walks in, and it's them, and they're like, looks like about to be intimate. And I'm like, he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to come into the whatever. And I was like, I mean, it was like, oh, my kiddo asked so many questions. Like, don't ask. I don't want to. Not in the movie theater. Like, it's a lot of
Yes.
And there's not a problem with him asking the question. Because my sister was like, why would that be a problem? And I'm like, it isn't. I just don't want to have to try to explain to him like this in a movie theater.
Yeah.
About what that is.
The problem is what if he doesn't ask the question? What if he asks his friends the question? What if you know what I mean? And that's
point.
And that's why I get frustrated with the Disney Channel and movies and stuff trying to talk about these social justice issues, sexual preference issues, sexual orientation issues with kids is, again, not because, dude, I can disagree with your lifestyle from a spiritual perspective and still love you and treat you with respect as a human.
Right.
My uncle is gay, and he's one of my favorite people in the world.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, since when did a disagreement about a lifestyle choice automatically mean that I hate you or that
I hate you, go die.
You know what I mean?
It's
like
not
it's not. No, it's not. And like I can say, like, hey man, cool. I disagree, but we can still be boys. We can still be friends. I'll still train with you. I'll still give you the shirt off my back. So I say that because I'm seconding what you're saying about how, like, this has nothing to do with, like, that I think people should be forced to live a specific way. I truly don't care either. The issue is when you take a child, specifically my child, and you put things in front of them that cause them to question our family's values, and they're not sure whether or not to ask. So then they start to internalize some truths that I don't want them to internalize. You know what I mean?
The perfect point was that it wasn't the thing was on TV. It wasn't that it was in the movie theater.
Yep.
It's that he was going to have something, right? If his ADHD was going crazy. I don't think he was even watching it. But it was like, if that came up, then the worst possible case scenario, and even when I was a kid, it was like, I didn't go to mom and dad. It was like, hey, what do you guys, and I talk with my friends. And if they're misinformed by the things they use on their phone, or they think they have some opinion of what they think is this and what's that, then it's like telephone, like gets kind of jumbled as it goes along the chain. And it's like, that's not good. And so that was the moment. That was like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, something like that, where I'm like, I want him to be able to trust me. And in trusting me means that he can come to me with that.
Yes.
And not go to his friends. And then the follow-up to that was last week, he found like a dead phone. Like it was a real phone, but it was no battery, no nothing. It was just like in a box of toys. And he was like, oh, and he's trying to get it to work. And I can see this, like, the response, like the dopamine stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and he's like, how do I get this to work? Is this mine? Is this my phone? And he's like going crazy. And I'm like, put it down. It's a dummy phone, right? You don't need that. And he goes, when can I have one? And I go, whenever I say you can have one, because I don't feel like that's a responsibility you should have to worry about.
Yep.
And then, it was just this thing where I didn't like the reactions it was triggering in my kiddo. And a key element here, parents, is sit down with your kiddo. Don't care how long it takes.
Nope.
Because then we had this thing where now I'm taking tablet away, I'm taking TV away, and for someone who's been used to that for a good amount of years, right? Because during COVID, it was like he has a lung condition, we don't want him in school.
Sure.
And things like that were happening. And I just went, let's take this away, get him outside. He's got a very creative mind. Let's do the drawings he used to do. All that went away when he got the rapid release of the technology.
Yes.
So that means when I take it away, that same response and aggression.
Oh, dude.
And it comes out.
It's a disaster for them when you take those screens away. Well, it's like the end of the world.
But you as the parent have to sit there and go, okay, let's talk with him, explain it. And if I have to say it multiple times, that's your job.
Yeah.
Because that's what I did. I sat there for 50 minutes to an hour, and he's having this like rapid release of emotions, anger, cry, like it's just going nuts.
Yep.
But when I finally was able to explain it to him that he's not in trouble for using all the time, I'm saying it's hijacking the way that you're thinking. So see now and I told him, like, it's an addiction now. I said, I want to break that, and I want to let your mind go and do all that stuff that makes you you. And I told them specifically that God made you, right? You have these gifts, so let's work with those. And I mean, I did that for probably a week. So once that happened last week, then I took it away. That was Monday. And then Monday to Saturday, it got better.
Yeah.
And then he's like, no, I don't want it.
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm like, if you do, and if we do, it's like a little bit at a time. And then I'm seeing the drawings come back. He's reading books. He's exploring things that are building him as a person, not just stuck inside this thing. I mean, it was terrible. I would be like, give me the switch. Yeah. And I'm like pulling it.
It's
not good.
100% an addiction. And
that's how it works.
It's intentional. I read something that Steve Jobs refuses to buy his kids iPhones.
He was like, "Oh, I'm not going to give him one."
No, he says, like, I know how we design these, and I know the purpose of the way we design them, and I'm not going to let my kids have them. And I think that goes for most big tech oligarchs, these big, these guys that help create all of this technology. Most of them do not let their kids engage with the technology, at least to the level that most parents allow their kids to engage.
And consumers use.
So that says a lot.
Yeah.
These guys know why these were designed the way that they were designed, and they're not going to let their kids have them. So
it just makes me laugh with that image, because I imagine just like the teenage kids, and they're like, this is how they're communicating. Everyone has iPhones or texting.
Yes.
They have the Razor.
Yeah, Steve Jobs kids are
like BlackBerry.
Still doing smoke signals and
Can't make it.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, dude, technology there's a lot of beautiful things about technology. It makes our life easier in a lot of ways. But it is absolutely insidious when it comes to kids, and you just can't get away from it. My kids were watching Transformers the other day, and
cartoon or the live
cartoon,
okay.
Transformers cartoon, and Optimus Prime says to one of the humans about one of the other Transformers, "Hey, can you do something for her?" I don't remember what the context was, and the little girl gets upset and says, whatever the Transformer was, you called her, or you called them her. And Optimus Prime was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And the other Transformer says, "My pronouns are they, them." And Optimus Prime says, "I apologize. Will you get them?" Da, da, da. And it was just one small scene, right? And I didn't hear anything before that while they were watching it.
That's enough for me.
But those types of things. And again, like I said, like if you're an adult and you identify as a panda bear, that's fine. That's what you want to, that's how you want to live your life. I don't care. But you're confusing children, specifically my children, about how they were created. And that to me is like, when did kids shows become political propaganda and not just entertainment?
Right.
None of that stuff was in. Now, granted, our cartoons when we were younger were probably worse in other things. I mean, I think about like Ren and Stimpy. Did you ever watch? I go back now and I look at some of the stuff that was in Ren and Stimpy. I was like, dude, I'm glad I didn't know what that was back then, because that is nuts that was in a kid's show. But
it's good because the adult goes, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the kid's like,
what? Yeah.
And the next scene, it's like, yeah, they don't get it.
They don't get it. And there's stuff I still don't get, But yeah, dude, that technology is becoming really dangerous for kids. And, there's a trend on TikTok right now where you can go into like private chat rooms, and you can give people awards that are worth actual money. You can buy these awards from TikTok to give to other people, right? You can do something similar on Reddit. I don't know if you give awards.
I see.
But these awards are worth like actual money. Like you pay TikTok $1 and you get this award, and you can give this award to somebody else. Well, that award is worth $1. Well, there's a trend where people are going into these chat rooms and they're asking girls to expose themselves in these live chats for different awards, and these girls are doing it. Well, the older girls, the adults, whatever, it's similar to OnlyFans.
Yeah.
But recently, these younger and younger and younger kids are getting a hold of these awards by exposing themselves to people on these private TikTok chat rooms. And the problem is you can't vet anybody. You don't know if that cute 14-year-old boy that your 13-year-old daughter is talking to is actually a cute 14-year-old boy.
Right.
Instead of a
there goes mine.
40-year-old, neckbeard living in mom's basement. You know what I mean? So it's
No, it's good. There's no more space on the card. See, this was my fear. You came in, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a lot of stuff. It's a good connection. I'm feeling there's going to have a lot to talk about.
Yep.
And then immediately that thing in the box, I went like this. Oh, if it was hooked up, we can go for like 4 hours. And now it's like, okay, those have to kind of be dialed in.
That's okay.
And so it's just like, I was going to mention, I think it was 57 minutes on here before that one lost the data, and then that one was there as well. Thank you, brother.
Well, dude, we can always do a part 2.
Yeah, I was going to say, just come back in, and
I'd love to.
This is great. And then to piggyback off of the idea you had before, anything that is you have an idea and you want to do in this room or utilize with Guardian, that I really want to, I think we can cultivate that into something really powerful and beneficial.
Yeah, let's do it.
And I'd love to work with you on anything.
Absolutely. I think that'd be great.
So you heard that. There's part 2. Part 2.
Yes, we're going to do a part 2.
We'll come back.
There's
a lot to talk about because now I can watch this and go like this. All right, I'm ready for part 2. Let's keep rolling with it.
Yes. Well, there's a lot. Yeah, man. We can touch on a lot of. I have a lot of funny stories about investigating crimes against children, which sounds odd that I say they're funny stories, but
we totally skipped the whole. Okay, yeah,
dude,
we definitely have to do a part 2.
We got funny stories about stuff that these offenders have said to me. We've got specifically, and I'll tell the full story.
You look sexy today. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, number one, I receive more pictures of male genitalia than any grown man should, and it is when I pose as a 13 or a 14-year-old girl online. Dude, it is like shooting fish in a barrel. It's disgusting, but at the same time, it's hilarious because it's like I'll go to these chat rooms or these apps and I'll be like, hi, I'm Samantha. And then like immediately like my inbox will blow up and it'll be like, hi, Samantha, here's my dick. And it's like, what? Yeah. And,
okay.
And it's, and some of them I'm like, I'm a little jealous.
Yeah.
Others I'm like, I wouldn't be sending pictures of that thing.
Yeah. No.
That, it's a funny looking thing you got there. I don't,
there was something funny in relation to that was like a part of, oh, there it goes. All right. We're good. Kevin, we'll do part 2.
Yes. This was fun.
Right. Yeah. You have a good time?
All right. Oh, dude, it was awesome.
All right.
A lot of fun.
Thank you all.
Yep.
See you next time.